This video is brought to you by our amazing patrons. And also Coco, Shadow and Pumbaa. Meow. Hi guys! I'm Janet from World Anvil. So for those of you who don't know, World Anvil is an online world building platform that allows you to write, organise and share your work. But today we're going to talk about immersive world building. That's about how you can get your audience absorbed in your world building, whether it's for your novel or short story or for your RPG campaign. So if you want to find out more about immersive world building, just keep watching. It's time to light up the forge. Immersive world building is vital. It keeps your audience engaged and it adds colour and mood to your locations and the scenes set within them. Get it right, and your audience will remember your world long after they leave the table or close your book. So in this primer on immersive world building, we're going to focus on the senses. But now that I've finished my coffee, let's move on to the next sense, and that's touch. Touch is a slightly complicated one because it's got a lot of different components within it. Weight, texture, temperature, vibration, wetness, physical contact, and pain. We feel physical contact all the time. We feel it from our clothes on our bodies, from our feet on the floor, from our butts on a chair, and we kind of tune it out. When you mention these small physical contact things within a scene, they're going to highlight that your character is noticing them, whereas usually they wouldn't. For example, a heavy crown on their head or a ring on their finger. These both give us story elements. We assume that they weren't there before and that something has recently changed. It's a great way to show without telling. When a character picks up a new object or touches a new surface, they instantly learn more about it. Scientific studies have shown that people are affected in their decision making and in their mood by the kinds of textures that they touch. So this means that when you're world building your objects or your locations, you can definitely affect the mood and the way your characters are going to feel when they interact with them by changing the different feel of those places. So how do we do it? Well, smooth objects are more pleasing than rough ones, usually, and in general, soft things are nicer to touch than hard things. Objects closer to our own body temperature are more comfortable to touch than things at temperature extremes. So if you want a relaxing scene, pick items that are soft, warm and smooth, like a thick fur rug or a kitty. An unpleasant tactile experience might be hard, cold and rough, like a stone floor or a bony lizard. When we're dealing with temperature extremes, symbolically, extreme heat is associated with fire, demons in hell, sun and emotional passion. Extreme cold is associated with death, the supernatural dead, night, the moon and lack of emotion. You can use these sensations to tie symbolic themes into your scenes. For example, in C.S. Lewis's Narnia, he uses an extreme cold in his winter to symbolise the deadness and the lack of change within the world. When spring comes again, which is warm and pleasing, then we know that everything is going to be all right. We have our happy ending. But let's talk about weight now because it's super interesting. Scientists found, in yet another study, that subjects who held heavy objects took their decision-making more seriously. Now this is actually ingrained in our minds. Just compare the clichés heavy-hearted and light-hearted. Heavy things seem to us serious and imposing and arduous and are often associated with age. For example, old trees or durable stone. Light things seem frivolous, fun and short-term, ephemeral. We can use these qualities associated with weight to completely change locations in our world building. For example, we could use heavy or light architectural styles to give different impressions, heavy or light building materials like wood or stone. Heavy brocade seems much more serious than chiffon, clay-rich soil is more difficult to work than light sandy soil, and huge hulking redwoods seem more imposing than skinny beech trees. So you can work different weights into your world building, both on a large scale and a small scale, to create the different mood that you want to in your locations. Pain, sadly, is something that everybody understands. It can be inflicted by a person, but it can also come from various other sources. An item of clothing, a very loud sound, a fire, basically any extreme of pressure or temperature or anything sharp. Now these kinds of pain can be cleverly worked into our world building to make it more immersive. For example, knowing that the dwarven forge or the helicopter pad makes an ear-splitting noise is going to create an uncomfortable, stressful environment for your protagonists. They're not going to want to stay there long. And as always, or at least since 50 Shades of Grey, almost always, pain is bad. It's something we don't like to experience. It's what we do when we want our protagonists to suffer, and what we do when we want our audience to sympathise with them. Pain also causes stress, depression, and vulnerability, especially chronic pain. Having an injured protagonist can often up the ante of a scene, increasing the stress and danger of it, and having an injured protagonist can make a previous conflict or encounter last much longer in the player's or reader's minds. You should use this sparingly though, or it'll become like the arm-chopping frenzy that is the Star Wars universe. And that feast for the senses brings us very nicely onto hearing. Nobody exists in complete silence, and there are small noises all around us, whether that's our own breathing, the whirring of the computer, or insects chirping. You can use these kinds of environmental sounds to give a more immersive impression of where your characters are, be that waves on the shore, wind in the trees, an owl in the nighttime, or the dawn chorus. So you can use sound to describe concrete things around you. For example, a horse's hoofbeats on flagstones. We recognise these sounds automatically, and it gives our readers certain expectations about the scene. Where's the damn horse? Can they feel flagstones under their feet? This is a very immersive way to use world building, and it's one of the best as long as you can be specific and use sounds which your audiences are going to recognise instantly. There are more ways to describe a sound though. For example, we can describe its sound profile. Sound you can break down into lots of different elements, but here is some of them. We can talk about the volume of a sound, how loud or quiet it is. In general, quiet sounds are relaxing, loud sounds are stressful. Loud sounds may also imply that more force is being used. Duration defines the length of a sound. Sounds can be continuous, long, or short. Percussive sounds, hits and slaps, tend to be shorter and more stressful. Pitch defines whether the sound is high or low. Generally, big things make low sounds and small things make high sounds. Extremes of pitch are uncomfortable, particularly high-pitched sounds, so like screams and high singing, because they can physically hurt our ears. Direction is another important consideration for sound. Where is it coming from with relation to the listener? We've evolved to treat sounds as a warning mechanism, so a sound that comes from an unseen source, such as from behind us, can create fear and suspense for our characters and for our readers. Finally, the timbre of the sound. That defines the sound quality. Is it clear or husky? Is it thin or rich? Is it nasal or chesty? Timbre is more difficult to describe and harder to measure than the other sound descriptors we've used, but it's very good for describing voices. And then, of course, you can combine these different sound variables to create a sound profile for your scene, which is going to set the mood and be immersive for your readers. Let's say you're in a feasting hall and you can hear music. Is the music quiet, high-pitched, with breathy voices? These sounds are associated with innocence and calm. On the other hand, is it loud, short, repeated drum beats? That sounds aggressive and exciting. These two choices set completely different mood and completely different expectations for the scene that you're walking into. Finally, we can use onomatopoeia to describe sounds. Things like bang, slap, tinkle. These are really just shorthand ways of using those sound variables to describe a sound. For example, slap we expect to be loud and short, whereas tinkle will be high-pitched and longer with a clear timbre. Some authors prefer to steer clear of onomatopoeia, but it's a very good way to create an immediate understanding of the sound that you're describing. And for that reason, it's very useful for RPG campaigns and also for literature for younger readers. But now we move on to the sixth sense. And the seventh, and the eighth, and the ninth, and the 10th. We have more than just 5 senses. What about our sense of time and space? Our atmospheric pressure, balance and acceleration, or even gravity? Humans can sense all these things. In the same way as we use the other senses, you can use these aspects to create a more immersive world-building experience, whether that's a scene set on a moon with low gravity, in a speeding car, or in a cramped tunnel under the earth. And then, once we're talking about non-human characters, they might be able to sense other forces, like magnetism or electricity. They may have more acute senses than us, like super smell or low light vision. And they might react to stimulus that we can't even detect, like pheromones or the infrared light spectrum. Non-human characters might also process sensory information slower or faster than us, so that's another thing to consider. And then, what if your world has other forces that might be sensed by your characters, like magic or midichlorians? It's especially important to consider the sensory impact of those kinds of forces in your world, the forces that aren't in our own. You can use a combination of different senses, like, for example, Terry Pratchett talks about the colour and the smell of magic. These sensory cues are the only way that your audience is going to experience those forces on a personal level. And who doesn't want to feel what magic feels like, right? And again, that's the key to immersive world building. Help them know what your world feels, smells, and sounds like. We have more than 5 senses, maybe even more than 10, and by using component parts of each sense, we have more control over the various moods we want to create, both in large-scale locations like forests and mountains, and in smaller-scale locations like buildings and rooms. And if we make our world building a feast for the senses, it'll immerse our audience even as it challenges and stimulates our protagonists. If this video has helped you at all with immersive world building, if it's helped you create mood in your scenes, or if it's inspired you at all, please give us a thumbs up. If you're ready for some serious world building, then head over to worldanvil.com to get started. And if you guys want to know more about the Building Worlds with Tale Foundry competition, that's having the pro writers behind Tale Foundry write a short story in your world, then head over to the Building Worlds with Tale Foundry competition page and we'll link that in the doobly-doo as well. Alright guys, there's only one thing left to say. So that's grab your hammer and go world build! These sensory cues are the only way that your audience is going to experience. And if you want some more world building inspiration or advice on how to use World Anvil or tutorials on how to use World Anvil, and if you want some more world building advice, inspiration, no advice in this sentence. This is an advice-free sentence.
Alright guys, there's only one thing left to say. So that's grab your hammer and go world build.